Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Hi, everybody. This is Estelle Erasmus, the host of Freelance Writing Direct. And today I am so happy to have the lovely Amy Ferris joining us today. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Estelle, this is so lovely. Thank you.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about Amy and give you her background, if you don't know. Amy Ferris is an author, a writer, a screenwriter, an editor, and a playwright. Her memoir, Marrying George Clooney, Confessions from a Midlife Crisis, was adapted into an off-Broadway play in 2012. Amy has written for both the small screen, TV, and the big screen, feature films. As a screenwriter, she was nominated for a Best Screenplay Award for BET, the Black Reel Award, for her adaptation of the film Funny Valentines. As an editor, she curated the anthology Shades of Blue, Writers on Depression, Suicide, and Feeling Blue from CL Press, and she co-edited the anthology Dancing at the Shame Prom. She co-authored Old School Love, HarperCollins, with Rev Run of Run DMC fame. Amy serves on a variety of advisory boards supporting women in the arts. She co-founded the Milford Readers and Writers Festival, is on the advisory board of the Women's Media Center, and is on faculty at the Kauai Writers Conference. In 2019, she was named one of Women E-News 21 Leaders for the 21st Century. In 2021, she was a recipient of Next Tribes, the 12 Women Who Changed the World. And in 2022, Amy was awarded and honored by the Thoughtful Book Festival as Inspirational Woman in Media. Her new memoir, which I have right here, Mighty Gorgeous, a little book about messy love, is published by She Writes Press. So we have a lot to talk about, Amy, and I feel like this may end up, because of the themes that you cover in the book, it may end up being a little bit like a therapy session, but we're going to go with it.
We're going to go with it. We're going to go with it. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
So I just want to tell everyone, Amy and I met on social media many years ago, and it might even be from our mutual friend, Sherry Amontenstein, who I know from my days as a magazine editor. Let's get into your book because, Amy, I might cry. This is a memoir and essays, so let's be clear of the form. And it's witty, it's heart-wrenching, it's the book that I wish I'd had when I was 16 years old, frankly, when I was struggling with my own feelings of self-worth and wondering who I was going to be in the world. I had no idea who I was going to be in the world, and it took me a lot to get to where I am today. You know, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and so defining yourself, let's say, through relationships is something that a lot of girls and then a lot of women do. And you talk about it from the perspective of what you went through and also the lens of how you're looking at it now. And that's where the wisdom comes in and how you can help so many people. So let's break it down and talk about, first of all, how did you think, okay, I've done this, I've done all these other books. now I want to write a book really about love and about self-love and it's primarily helping women, right? Because you even say that to feel they matter, to feel they can have a voice. So tell me how that all came together.
It's funny. And first of all, I just want to say it is so lovely that it was Sherry that brought us together. I think it was really, this book was born out of my posting on Facebook. It was born out of what was originally Post Coffee Pre-Wine. And I would post every day. And then Brooke Warner, who is, the publisher, she writes, and the goddess queen, she said to me, how would you like to put some of those pieces in a book? Would you think about that? And that was a while ago. And then a lot of people that follow, a lot of women who follow me always said, have you ever thought about putting this in a book so I can like open it up? And, it felt so organic. And then there are pieces that I wrote specifically for the book, but I was really proud that there were so many women who read me and wanted to have pieces that they can open up, and just open the book. And really that's how it was born. It was born out of the wonderful women of Facebook and Brooke, who is such a champion and supporter. And that's really how it was born. Why don't you put a little book together?
So you would post something like, "Hey women, don't underestimate yourself. Your voice matters," or, stand up to the people trying to step on you, especially the patriarchy.
Oh,
You
and
know?
a lot of women too, it's like it's a combination, it is. It's a real
Yeah. And
combination.
you have a distinct voice, and you have a voice that people listen to because of your background, of your experience. You're not just coming, there are people that just end up on social media posting platitudes, and they're not going to get that many people to follow or agree with them because they don't have the depth of experience and knowledge that will make them credible. And I see this every day. But
Yeah.
with you, you're the leader of an army in a way.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. I think a lot of it, Estelle, is that I dropped out of high school. I was really rebellious. I fucked up a lot. I did so many things that, I wanted attention. I wanted to be loved. And I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be loved. And so I kind of feel like I'm not ashamed. I used to be ashamed. I used to have massive shame that when people would say to me, "Where'd you go to school?" I would think, "Oh my God, I have to tell them that I didn't go to school, that I have my GED. Are they going to like me? Are they going to think I'm of value?" And I have to say that I think one of the things that I've been able to do through my writing is to make both men and women and kids, by the way, feel like they can do anything. I didn't give up on myself. I didn't crawl in a ball. I was rebellious. I was scared. I had no self-love. And I wouldn't trade me for the world.
Because all your experiences led you to who you are today.
And to have empathy and to like really be able to say, I know how you feel, and not just say that. When a young person talks to me about feeling, worthless, I could say, hey, I was there. Look at me now. And the thing about it too is that I don't see myself. When you read my bio, I was like, who the fuck is that?
But you did it.
You know,
That is you.
I think when we hear some, I'm sure you feel that too. I mean, you're remarkable. When when we hear other people
Yeah.
reading our bios or saying this is what we've done, you know, in a way it takes our breath away.
Yeah,
because it is huge. It is incredible. It isn't, it's not a Pulitzer Prize and I'm not,
right.
but it's remarkable to have taken this journey in my life.
I love that because, I was someone who always wanted to be noticed. And I tried it in many different ways. Even in my book, I write a scenario of how I was in my favorite polyester pink jumpsuit and I didn't fit in. And I learned how to fit in, but I learned that my superpower ended up in being really owning who I am and my reality and not allowing anyone else to define me by their reality.
And that's a hard one. And it's the most important thing. It's kind of that feeling of wanting to be loved, but not wanting to be defined. It's such a strange but wonderful line to cross,
Yeah,
you know. And the truth is, we also grew up in a period where we wanted to be loved and we
yeah,
wanted to be liked and we wanted to be noticed and we wanted to be seen and heard. We grew up very much craving that. And I think women like you and me and so many other women have the wisdom, have the experience of being able to say, you don't really have to go through hoops. But for me, I really truly I don't think I'd be who I am if I didn't have any of that craving.
it makes who you are and it makes the calmness because you know who you are. It's interesting because I've been watching Feud, The Swans, and Truman Capote. And Babe Paley, who was the wife of the head of CBS at the time,
Right.
had to be perfect. She felt like, and that is such a pressure on a woman. And I see it like in teenagers. I mean, my daughter's a teenager, and this feeling and social media sometimes exacerbates it. They have to look a certain way or be a certain way, even with the vernacular out there that, oh, anything goes. It's still a world where people do make first impressions, and so you need to be conscious of it, but before you've formed a complete sense of self, I think it's hard to navigate that.
It's really hard to navigate that.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, it's kind of like, yeah, we thought we needed to be perfect.
Yes.
And perfection is overrated, and there is no
Yes.
such thing. And the other thing is perfect is I think it's very objective. It's what do I need to be for that person? Then
Yeah.
what do I need to be for that person? So we're never really who we are because we're trying to, be something for someone else all the time.
It's
And
so interesting because I recently wrote a piece for Shondaland about parenting my daughter with hearing loss. I have hearing loss.
yeah,
And I was always very ashamed of it. Like, people would think, what's wrong with me? I'm old. I can't catch up. But I wrote, like, what if you write about what shames you,
oh,
then it no longer has the power to hurt you. And it's really true because people reached out to me from all over, which I'm sure you get all the time from the way that you write, and said, "Oh, you too," or "Oh, I read this and now I'm going to the doctor to get my hearing check or my husband's hearing check." And it's just that it's this unifying force. And so I'm tying this back to your book because you talk about the limits of perfection, and people don't relate to perfection really. They don't look at you and go, "Oh, you're perfect and now I want to be your friend." You can talk about the cracks or the things that have gone wrong. People say, I can like let it out because I'm not alone. There's someone there. So let's get into the structure of the book. So you took like some of these Facebook posts and you said, okay, I'm going to expand them because Brooke supported this idea. And so how did you structure the book? Like, and what was different about structuring this book than your other books?
Well, I do have to say that Ken, who is my extraordinary husband, he's really, really wonderful at being able to say, that piece doesn't belong there, or that piece should be. And between him and Brooke, I felt like I had this wonderful army of support and leading me through the book. Kind of, this is where it began and where it ends. And then the pieces that are in between, kind of like it connecting dots. And I really did want it to feel that way. I wanted it to begin with what would I tell my younger self? And the very last piece about my father and my mother and Ken, and when my dad was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was also on a journey,
Yeah.
and writing about discovering who I was, and there's something you said earlier that I think is so brilliant. It's when we discover ourselves through another lens, like looking at what we did when we were younger. There are times when I cringe and I think, oh my God, how did I do that? Why did I do that? But when I see myself, when I write about it, I think how brave, how courageous. I see myself as this young girl who was so never felt like she belonged, never felt like she fit in. And that takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
to continue. And I look at the kids today, and you're a mom, and so many don't feel like they fit in or belong. And I think women like you and I and an army of other women are here to tell them they not only belong, but they need to be audacious, not follow the rules. There are no rules. To break those rules, to become who they're meant to be in the world.
You're right. I mean, I was an intense, dark-haired little girl who was a bookworm and like read books all the time and had my kind of head in the air spinning with fantasy and was very much a nerd. I took a book out of the library. I talk about it in my book, Writing That Gets Noticed, but I took a book out of the library about how to be popular. And I thought, okay, brush my hair 100 times a night, talk to people, do different things. And little nerdy me ran for student government and made a speech, and I was not popular. And I ended up, making a speech and thinking I did great. And somebody came over to me and said, "Oh, we counted the votes, and out of 420, you got 14."
Oh, but you did it.
I did.
It's in the
Yeah.
doing, really, right? You
Yeah, I
did
told you this would be like a therapy session. Let's get back to your book because
okay,
there are
fine.
so many beautiful. You wrote, "We're on page 17. We're not on this earth to master suffering. We are here to create magic," and that is just stunning. And I know that's from your heart. And you talk about pleasing others and how you wanted to please others as a little girl. And you just talk so deeply from the heart that I love this. We get to choose who we want in our lives. We get to choose the folks who lift us, inspire us, make us feel like we've swallowed the sun.
The part about we're not here to suffer, we're not here to, that really comes out of my Buddhist practice of really, really understanding that we're not here to be the best in hell. you know, we're not here to perfect suffering.
I
We're here to really create incredible lives. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to be messy. And that doesn't mean that we're going to have, perfect, wonderful, all sunlit days. It
right.
means, that it's about creating the kind of life you want. And that's hard.
It
Most of us don't get handed all of the goodies in life. There's only a few people who get that. And I applaud every human who gets those goodies and turns it into something extraordinary for everybody else. But, most of us just kind of like struggle through, but we're not here to perfect suffering. We don't win awards for that.
Right. Yeah, we're here, I think, to try and have all the good that life can offer and
Absolutely.
have our mindset that way. And I think that's really important. There is a concept that a lot of writers deal with, and it's imposter syndrome. It's feeling that they do not deserve a place at the table. And I'll tell you where I see it, because I have a lot of students. And I will tell you that I do not feel that, because I've had that 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell says you have in doing something. So all
Yes.
those years, I sat at the desk at a magazine and curated content and wrote cover lines and interviewed experts and wrote columns. That's my time in the mines. So I've done my time in the mines. So in no way do I ever feel like an imposter. But people who are writers, and maybe they've been writing for a couple of years, maybe they have a book out or two, and then they start teaching. That's when they tell me they feel like imposters. Like, who are they after 2 years of success, right? Measured against, which I don't believe in measuring. I don't think it's good. You measure against yourself. That's it. Or you let other people inspire you, but not in a way that's going to hurt your self-esteem, which is what imposter syndrome is. So can you speak to that a little?
I think most people I know experience that. Really, truthfully, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it also means that there's humility and, humble. I think it gets really screwed up when you feel like you can't do anything or that isn't who you are. I think if it prevents us from doing something, that's bad. Because most people I do know, really, think, oh my God, who am I? Who am I to do that? Or who am I to stand on that stage? Or who am I? And I think the people that I really kind of honor the most are the ones who talk about it and say, yes, I experienced this, and don't push it away. Because I do know, there are some people who are experts and they never talk about it. They talk about that they overcame it. But I don't know if you really overcome something like that. I think it flares up, that feeling of, I can't do this. Why should I do this? I think it's imposter syndrome is something that most people I know experience or feel in a very strange little way. I think it's also about not feeling good enough or not feeling deserving or thinking, oh, I'm not worth this. All of that goes under imposter syndrome. And for me, it does, the umbrella of that. Jen Pasteloff talks all the time about not being enough. And here's this gorgeous, amazing, brilliant creature who also has hearing problems.
I know that.
She's remarkable, and she talks about that. And I think it's something that we all feel. I remember years ago, Estelle, I had a therapist and I was talking about the shame that I was feeling and the guilt. And she said, you inherited that. That's not yours to own. I literally, when she said that, it was a moment of unbelievable clarity. It's not yours to own. And I think that that's something for all of us. It's not ours to own. We carry it,
Right.
don't have to own it. We can rent it or lease it, but we don't have to own it. We don't have to buy it. And, it's the same thing with imposter syndrome. Friends of mine who work in the film business, and they keep thinking, how did I get this gig? Or how did, they're going to fire me. I'm going to get fired. So I think it's not so much that we need to overcome it. It's that we have to walk through it.
That makes a lot of sense. And you are the woman today that your mother wanted to be, which is lovely, and lovely that you understand it. You talk about your mom having dementia. My dad has Alzheimer's, and it's debilitating. It's very hard because the person they were is no longer. And it's a disease that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Do you think that all the trials and tribulations that you went through in the love department and, getting to the point in the professional department, do you think that helped you find your writer's voice? And if so, how?
I think when I was a little girl, I would write in a diary. It was the diary, my diary was my best friend. It
Oh,
was where I was able to like share my deepest feelings and deepest dreams and wacky shit. And I would have a key. And so I would have this diary and it would have a key, and then I'd have another diary and it would have a key. I think writing for me wasn't something that I chose. I think it chose me.
oh,
I don't think that I could have done, except for bowling. I could have been a professional bowler, but pro bowling. But I writing for me was always where I could put everything down, where I wasn't scared. I was afraid to say how I felt, but I wasn't afraid to write how I felt. And so writing has always been my savior. It's always saved me. And that's really the truth. I think that there's a lot of people that writing chooses. It's, you kind of think, this is what I need to be doing. This is how I need to communicate. This is how I can reach another heart. And, for me, that's the most important thing, hands down.
I think telling your stories and connecting to people is a way to feel seen, is a way to share your experiences. And you could be vulnerable. I could be more vulnerable on the page sometimes than I can be in person. Like, I don't think people look at me and go, oh, she's so vulnerable. But if you read, like, that's why I say read my writing, read my personal stories, and then you'll see the vulnerability.
That's the thing about writing, more than, sitting and talking to somebody. I think when people read stories like what we write, what Sherry writes, what Melissa Giberson and JJ Elliott, what all of these women write, it's they connect to it. When you're reading something and all of a sudden you feel your heart pounding, or you feel like, oh my God, she just said, or he just said what I was thinking. That's power. That's a superpower, to
Yeah.
be able to read something and know that it connected to you in a way that is soul deep. And I think that that's what, when we write our stories, our essays and pieces of who we are, that's what we're doing. We're saying, come in, come in. We're going to have a party. Come on in.
That's beautiful. You're working and you speak very highly of Brooke Warner from She Writes Press. She Writes Press is what we call a hybrid publisher, right? There's a certain investment that the writer does for the marketing, and then other things are determined in terms of royalty and payment. What is your experience? Because you've worked with traditional model where the writer does not outlay any funds and there's a set royalty agreement, etc. What's your experience been like with working with She Writes Press?
I want to give Brooke Warner the biggest shout out right now. I worked with her at Seal Press. She was my editor. She was the one who was reading Marrying George Clooney on a BART and like ran into, Seal Press and said, you've got to buy this. She is so incredibly generous and talented and kind. And working at She Writes is very different for me than having worked at HarperCollins or Seal or Houghton Mifflin. I think the thing about She Writes is that they really, really want your voice in the world. The business thing I don't get into because I don't know a whole lot about it. seriously, and I mean that genuinely. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do know that the people that are there at She Writes, Lauren and Brooke, that they care, that they nurture you. They want your voice in the world. And that to me is wholly, wholly important. And I've only known Brooke, up until I mean, I knew her at Seal Press, but then we became really great friends. So it's kind of like having your best friend walking you through a whole process, and it's extraordinary. She Writes is wonderful.
That's lovely. I've noticed a trend with authors that I've seen this lately. They're writing one book a year. I mean, I'm already behind because I don't have a book coming out this year. Maybe I will
I
next
don't
year.
either.
But
Hmm.
what do you think of that trend?
I think it's very personal. I mean, I think if, I'm not writing a book right now. I'm not going to have a book coming out in 2025. Writing to me is not, I don't, when people say, what do you do? How do you write every day? Do you get up? And, I get up and I have coffee and I think, okay, I'm going to post something on Facebook because that's become like a real habit. It's almost, I feel like I have to join Facebook Anonymous, but it's kind of like something that just happens for me. Like marrying George Clooney. It was born out of me sitting at 3 o'clock in the morning or 3:50 in the morning, Googling old boyfriends. He was sleeping wearing an eye mask, and I was at my computer in the, experiencing menopause. And I thought, oh my God, wonder whatever happened to blah blah. And I Googled, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, he's a rock and roll. It's so weird. And so the very first piece for marrying George Clooney was based on having hot flashes at 3 and 4 in the morning and thinking, what am I going to do? So I Googled old boyfriends, and that became really kind of like the beginning. And then I started to think, what else do I do in the middle of the night when Ken is sleeping? What else can I do that's kind of secretive? He's sleeping, I'm in the living room. Oh, what can I do? And then in the middle of writing what was a very kind of funny little charming book, my mom was diagnosed with dementia. And I called up Brooke and the publisher at the time. And I said, I don't know what to do because it wasn't funny anymore. Brooke said, I want you to make a sharp turn and I want you to now write about your relationship with your mom. And that became such an emotional journey for me. Because
Mm.
I went from, goofy stuff like, oh my God, where the fuck is he? To literally going to Florida, moving my mom to New Mexico. It was the beginning of my understanding my mother and the complete implosion of our family. Literally, our family exploded. It went into bits and pieces. But that was when I knew who my mother was. And I had never seen my mother that vulnerable. My mother was that woman who would put on makeup just to go to the deli and do her hair. And she became this small, frightened, frail human being. And I know that I had lost my mother before that,
Right.
but now I was losing something different. And it gave me the opportunity to understand who my mother was. And I write about this too, Estelle. My mother was so angry. And I always thought she was the most powerful human on the planet. And what I realized was that she was so filled with fear.
Wow.
I thought she was powerful, and really what she was sad. And she didn't live the life like many, many, many mothers of
Yeah.
our generation. She didn't live the life she wanted. She was an artist. She was so talented. But she got married and moved to the suburbs and had 2 kids and the whole suburban dream. But that wasn't her dream. And at the end of her life, I really understood that all that rebellion, all that stuff I did, all that kicking and screaming and fighting and kind of reshaping the mold was really because that's who she wanted to be. And I became who she wanted to be.
Beginning, you were channeling her anger was the only outlet for it. Like, people have roles in a family, so your role was to express the unexpressed anger that she, for whatever reason, could not allow herself.
And I think that that's pretty remarkable that you said it like that. That's so perfectly
Somebody
beautiful.
who's been through years of therapy.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I mean, I remember distinctly standing in front of that mirror in the hotel and catching my image, catching who I was, and thinking, oh my God, I have become the woman she's always wanted to be. You know, I didn't have children. I was an artist. I married this extraordinary man who's also an artist. We're two imperfect people, and we've created a life. I think that it's our obligation now as women to tell the women, the younger women, fight like motherfuckers
Yes,
for your life and for your rights, because we stand on the shoulders of the women who fought for us.
I agree. So I want to get back a little bit to some of the tools and techniques. You're a screenwriter. I mean, you must have so many great tips.
What you are really is creating characters and how they react to each other. One best piece of advice I ever got, and it was from Julie Dash. She said, come in the middle of a conversation.
I love that.
You don't need to like say, hi, how are you? And then have 25 minutes and then just come in. What is the point of that scene? What
Yes.
is it you want to convey?
Don't do the throat clearing,
No.
all the preamble.
Come in the middle or come at the end, and envision what that would look like. Where would that scene take place? Is it at a kitchen table? Is it while they're walking? I think that in telling the story through the screen, it's like you're coming in the middle of somebody's life, or you're coming in a moment, and that moment becomes 2.5 or 2 hours. Whether it's a love story, whether it's a political movie, whether it's a fantasy, you never really come in at the birth of a story.
Right.
You come in while it's has a heartbeat and it's out in the world.
I had a couple of thoughts. I think Sherry was one of the connecting factors for us on social media, but I think we were in books together. I think we
Oh,
were in the Hillary.
oh my God, we were.
Yes. And were we all, to that might have been the original connection.
Hillary. Was it Love Her Not?
Love her not.
Oh my God, yes, we
Uh,
were.
were
Right?
we both in Sherry's book as well?
Yes. Oh my
So
God.
that came later.
That came much later. And she published with Seal.
Yes.
And Laura Mazur was her editor, who's
Yeah.
now the phenomenal agent in the world.
Amy, what is next for you?
I know that Marrying George Clooney, they're going to revise that play at the theater here, which is so delightful. Allison Taylor is going to be doing it. And oh, it's so great. And I'm not sure what I'm going to be writing next. I'm not sure what I'm kind of like every day is.
Different. And you're teaching, you teach.
I do. I do a writing workshop once a month, which I love doing that.
Yes.
I love working with women and saying, just get it out of your body, put it on the page.
That's beautiful. And what do you most want people to come away from your book with?
That their life is of unbelievable value.
Everyone needs that message, and not everybody has the support structure in place to give them that message. And so your book is a great messenger to give that message. So thank you for putting that out into the world, Amy.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I've been sitting with a girlfriend for an hour.
Oh, I'm honored. Follow me at EstelleSerasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.